Hi, my name is Landon Powell, and this is my multimodal presentation on ocean pollution. So to begin with, ocean pollution is a topic which relies pretty heavily on its trendiness to stay in the public eye. It's something that falls in and out of vogue pretty regularly, and every once in a while it'll trend for a little while, and then most of the time it sort of falls by the wayside. Regardless of the point that we're at in its sort of popularity cycle, whether we're in a time where it's really popular or in a time where it's not so popular, pollution in our oceans are an extreme detriment to the health of our planet and our Earth's natural processes. So things like climate, temperature, weather patterns, the ability of the ocean to absorb oxygen, the resources within the ocean to regenerate. All of these things are greatly affected by ocean pollution. As I've already said, it falls in and out of vogue. So sometimes celebrities like to mention it. Every once in a while, Leo will mention it in an Oscar speech, or recently, a few weeks ago, hashtag Team Seas trended for about a week, and then, as it usually goes, it sort of fell off. But ocean pollution is something that, unless we constantly have it on our radar and we're constantly thinking about it, we will most likely get to a point pretty soon where the damage that we've done is all but irreparable. So, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. This is basically the number one thing that people default to when they're talking about ocean pollution, or they're trying to get someone to pay attention to them when they're talking about ocean pollution. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch is a zone in the Pacific which accounts for two of the largest 5 major OPA, or ocean plastic accumulation zones, in our oceans globally. According to Susan L. Dowdle, author of Transoceanic Trash, International and United States Strategies for the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, the size of the eastern garbage patch is around twice the size of Texas. Combined, the eastern and western garbage patches are double the size of the United States. It's also important to keep in mind when you're reading these figures that this only accounts for plastic and other forms of pollution that we can see on the surface. So essentially, anything that's sunk too deep for satellites to be able to identify as part of the patch isn't accounted for in this figure. So just a very thin layer on the top is all that this accounts for. Our oceans are one of our greatest natural resources, if not the greatest natural resource we have on our planet. According to Luke Van Hoof and others of Food from the Ocean, towards a research agenda for sustainable use of our ocean's natural resources. By 2050, it is expected that food, clean drinking water, and sustainable energy has to be produced for a world population of close to 10 billion people. Our seas and oceans represent 71% of the Earth's surface, yet its space and resources today are not sustainably utilized to their full extent. So a lot of us only think of our ocean in terms of the foods and other products that we can derive from them, but there's really a lot more to it than that. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, more than half of our planet's oxygen is produced by oceanic processes, and our oceans absorb 50 times more carbon dioxide than our atmosphere. So when we talk about the greenhouse effect, greenhouse gases, our ocean, which the greenhouse effect mostly has to do with our atmosphere. So gases which can absorb light and heat our atmosphere and contribute to global warming are in our atmosphere, and that effect can be seriously mitigated if we keep our oceans healthy and maintain their ability to absorb these compounds like carbon dioxide. Our oceans also play a huge role in our climate. They conduct heat from the equator to the poles, which essentially regulates our climate and weather patterns. If that weren't to happen, if warm water were to just stay where it tends to accumulate, some serious environmental hazards would come from that, like hurricanes would be able to gain a lot more steam, for example. The NOAA also states that 76% of all U.S. trade involves some sort of marine transportation. The U.S. economy relies on our oceans to produce $282 billion annually in goods and services, and that ocean-dependent U.S. businesses employ nearly 3 million people. So other than the regulatory properties of our ocean for the climate, we also heavily rely on it for our economic processes. And these statistics only account for the United States' reliance on the ocean economically. So in regards to the sources of pollution, our oceans are polluted by several different sources known as point and non-point sources of pollution. So a point source of pollution would be a direct source of pollution, like in this picture here, where you can clearly see basically garbage and chemicals, basically just bad stuff just being directly pumped into the ocean, pretty much. A non-point source of pollution would be something like groundwater leaching from agriculture, where fertilizers and other nutrients from agricultural practices make their way gradually, and it's not a direct form of pollution. Some main point sources of pollution are basically the direct dumping of things like trash and plastics into the ocean, as well as oil spills. Oil spills are considered a point source of pollution. Main non-point sources of pollution are, as I said, things like runoff and the leaching of volatile chemicals that are used in manufacturing or agricultural practices. Plastics are a huge part of the problem with ocean pollution. A lot of times pictures will circulate of animals being harmed physically via constriction or ingestion, like for example a sea turtle with a beer 6-pack plastic wrapped around its neck. But this really only scratches the surface of the harm that plastics do to our oceans. Not only do they directly kill sea life, but they also hamper the reproductive ability of the sea life on a genetic level. The pollutants that are leached from plastics can cause a lot of different issues, the most concerning of which is infertility, and this is caused by compounds known as EDCs, or endocrine disrupting chemicals. So not only are these plastics killing sea life directly by the physical means that I already cited, like constriction or ingestion, but they're actually changing these organisms on a genetic DNA level and essentially making it so that they're unable to reproduce effectively. Hannah L. Frond and others of Estimating the Mass of Chemicals Associated with Ocean Plastic Pollution to Inform Mitigation Efforts write that we estimate that 87,000 tons of plastic bottles, bottle caps, expanded polystyrene, food and drink containers, cutlery, grocery bags, straws or stirrers, and food wrappers entered the ocean in 2015. Approximately 190 tons of 20 chemical additives entered the oceans with these plastic items. According to the Environmental Health News, one of the best ways to prevent ocean pollution on an individual level is through conscious consumption. So this means being cognizant of the packaging that we purchase and use, the resources required to produce the products we buy, etc. Avoiding single-use plastics and buying clothing made of natural fibers, so cotton, wool, and linen, are both excellent ways to reduce ocean pollution. So this essentially lessens the need to produce synthetic fabrics and other plastics, which will ultimately end up in the ocean and won't really have much use in the long run. It may seem like going down to your local beach and doing some cleaning up is a drop in a bucket, but really a little goes a long way. Finally, it's possible to simply petition your local, state, or federal government if you have ideas regarding legislation or future practices which could reduce ocean pollution. And here is my works cited. Thank you.